Aloha and welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to the Got Your Six podcast. This six-question podcast brings together high performers to share their methods, strategies, and ideas, delivered in an informative and, most importantly, actionable way that'll help you lead yourself and those around you from the battlefield to the boardroom. Coming to you every episode, I'm your host, Tony Nash. And into the breach.
Nothing mentioned on this podcast is an endorsement or opinion of the Department of Defense.
I got your six, we got your back. Got your six, we got your back. Got your six, we got your back. I got your six.
Sixers, what an absolute treat we have today. Dan Horgan is with us, Special Projects Manager, Marketing Extraordinaire over at Black Rifle Coffee. I know he doesn't do a lot of podcasts, so I'm literally, and I'm going to show him, I'm pinching myself because I'm stoked he's here. Dan, welcome to the Got Your Six podcast.
Tony, thanks for having me. And you were definitely pushing me and making me blush.
We call it like we see it here at the Got Your Six podcast. As we were talking beforehand,
I'm honored.
And we are honored to have you here. As we were talking beforehand, you told me a story that you haven't shared before. And it's how you got into Black Rifle. If you wouldn't mind just kind of telling us the backstory of that.
Yeah, it's one of those, it's a military transition story. So I retired from the Oklahoma Air Guard, November of 16, was working some overseas contracts, came back. Anyway, so I'm basically an analyst of almost like a sergeant major for an aviation company in Oklahoma City. My wife is guard, was getting full-time orders down to San Antonio. And I immediately was like, yeah, let's do it. I mean, I'm going to leave this really good job. But the things that got in my head as a veteran was, I was like, Yeti will pick me up, Black Rifles in San Antonio, and then even Grunt Style. It didn't pan out like right away, right? I mean, the cards didn't fold or go is the way I planned, but it was like 2 months. And so I was always on Indeed. I'm on Indeed. And next thing I know, I see a job description that says executive assistant / project manager for the CEO and co-CEO of Black Rifle. And I'm like, boom, me, done. And I apply and I didn't hear anything for like a few days, right? And everybody knows how that goes because you don't know how long it's going to take. Well, I end up, right, because huge LinkedIn fan. So I ended up direct messaging our former chief operating officer, Scott Harvey. I DM'd Scott and I said, because the job description on Indeed literally read, they wanted a transitioning, I believe it said transitioning 03 who used to be a general's aide. And right with my ego a little bit, I said, how about a combat E7 who's worked for a CEO of an aviation company? I don't know. Timing and luck played into that. Scott bit off on that direct message, had an interview a few days later and then started a week after that. Yeah.
But it shows, and as we talked, right, that's not the way to do it all the time. But when you
Correct.
show others the value you can provide, where it's not a selfish thing, it's just like, I understand what you're looking for. Here's how it looks in practice and where I can deliver. I think
Sure.
really is something that we can all kind of learn from. I mean, our conversation, right? Like I had told you before we started, I've had you on the list for a while. It took me about 6 months to work up the courage, not because you're not approachable, but it was just kind of like, there was a lot of stuff going on at Black Rifle,
Yep.
SPACing and there's a lot. So to take what you learned from the military and what you constantly implement now at Black Rifle, if you had to pick one thing, what do you think that is?
That is making me successful or what's, yeah.
Yeah.
One of the things I see really, and I've actually thought about it, is it's even like you said, like I was early logging into the podcast. Reliability. Really, that is a skill set. If you're successful in your military career, you're reliable. And if people know they can rely on you, you are an asset, right? And what do you do with an asset? You mainly keep that asset. So showing that reliability day in and day out is a huge thing because that's what it did for me. 20 some years, right, in the active duty Air Force to the Air Force Reserves to the Air National Guard, right? show times in PT at 05 in the morning, but maybe the night before, we didn't get done till midnight, partying or something crazy. Reliability is still showing up at 5 a.m.
Where do you have a specific instance? Was that something that you gained when you joined the Air Force, or did that reliability was instilled in you throughout your life before you joined the service?
Yeah, I might be one of those weird cases. So I'm an only child. My mother raised me. So that was probably a little bit instilled in me. But then I went to a high school in Towson, Maryland, and it was a private all boys high school, like sport coat and tie. I think that really groomed me, for that responsibility. I did college for a little bit, but then that's when I ended up joining the Air Force. So, I mean, I don't think it's something you're born with. If people think about some of those skill sets, but I think if you have the right environment, the right mentors, and mentors, whether parents, teachers, friends, right, who you associate yourself with, that reliability, something like that can be taught and learned.
How have you been able to create that environment for others that might not have had the same kind of upbringing of reliability, and kind of foster an environment to show others that, hey, reliability is the name of the game here. If you're not reliable, I'm sorry, you got to go somewhere else. But how do you kind of instill that environment within the organization that you have at Black Rifle?
Yeah, I'm not always successful. I mean, I'm not the best leader, for sure, right? I think you always can learn. I would love, though, to think that, especially as I'm older now and I've learned it, right, is patience. And so part of that is letting someone, giving them a task, right, mentoring them for it, let them accomplish that task. And then hopefully, they enjoy it, and that reliability factor can play into it. But no, there's some people that sometimes I do a lot of events, and you might have an event and the event goes well, but maybe the performance didn't go well, and they didn't, exude that reliability that I thought maybe they had, right? And at that point, then it's a conversation. Again, here are my expectations. So that's the other part of it too, right? You can be reliable if you know the expectations. So if I give someone my expectations, hopefully they're reliable enough to do them. If they don't accomplish them, and then it's a difficult conversation.
And that feedback is so critical, both up front, right? Like you said, establishing the expectation, and then kind of coming back hey, this went well or bad or somewhere in the middle, and here's how we go. And then you try it again, right? It's almost like it's an iterative process, right? Where you're constantly trying and seeing and pushing kind of people to the edge of their growth, their comfort zone to grow.
Right. Well, and they have to know that what those expectations are so they can hit those. And you can't discipline or, give someone that feedback if you don't tell them what that initial, expectation was. So Tom Davin's our co-CEO, and Tom has a favorite saying that I've learned from him, and I'm not sure if he learned it from somewhere down the road in his career, but I can't I can't expect what I don't inspect either, right? That comes from the leader aspect, right? Yeah. That's one of my favorite ones. And so, a lot of these events, sometimes people are like, oh my God, you're doing some really cool stuff. And I get to go to those, but it's because I'm inspecting, but I'm also making sure that I am giving those expectations. But yeah.
And I've followed your, as you continually post on LinkedIn, right? Not only just Black Rifle, you continue to be outdoors and this avid outdoor enthusiast, which massive fan of, right? It also shows you're not willing to get your hands dirty. You're willing to get your hands dirty, and you're not opposed to it. If you're going to expect somebody to do something, you're there too, doing the thing with them when possible.
You have to lead you have to lead from the front, right? And that's something throughout my, career for sure that I always saw. And then it's something I instill. I can't expect you to, clean up horse manure if I haven't shoveled that horse manure myself.
Absolutely. So where in, as you constantly learn and grow as a leader, where are you challenging yourself now?
Yeah, some of the stuff that's challenging for me is, I don't want to this. It's almost just still finding out what you want to do with your life. So I'm 50, and then some of the things that I've done. So the challenge is actually I guess what I get at is the challenge is to determine what I still want to be when I grow up. right? Being a jack of all trades, you see a lot of stuff. Jack of all trades is great, but like, you got to specialize in it. Recently I've had people ask me like, well, what do you want to do? And, and I would tell you, unfortunately, I know a realm, a theme of what I want to do, but I almost can't narrow it down. And so that's a challenge for me.
Yeah, and it shows, as you talked about, right? Like, what do you want to do? It's like, you're setting goals and like working towards those goals, but you're also like defining success where it means the most to you, right? And your family,
right?
And plans change over time, right? Like we being dual military, we're constantly planning, 5 years out, but that changes like every 3 to 6 months.
Right. Exactly.
Yeah. But to be so intentional to continue to define what success looks like for you and those closest to you is very powerful, because you don't allow yourself to kind of get sucked into a specific path, right? Like you said, you have a framework, but that's better than just saying like, I want to do either everything or I have to do this thing in order to find happiness. And that's right. I mean, I tip my hat to you.
It is. Well, and that's the thing though. It's different than the military. So on the military side, right, you're not you're not profit driven. You're either going to be very job specific driven, career driven, right? Rank and things like that. A company like Black Rifle, we're a profit company. So I understand, even though I didn't grow up in that world in the sense is that, it's profit driven. So where am I going to provide value that's going to add revenue to the company and not on the other side of just, spend the company's money. So things like marketing, you get a couple $1 million marketing budget, you better double or triple it, right? These events that I get to do, sometimes, the buzzwords ROI, right? The return on investment, you might not see it, but, there's a lot of different avenues to be able to determine that data, brand awareness from the social media, are you doing impressions? For us, are we doing coffee club subscriptions? Yeah. So you constantly have to evaluate that. But that's one of the things that really for me that I harp on is, again, that you go back to that reliability is how am I also providing value that's going to add revenue into the company?
Right. And that value piece is so critical, because you could go spend a lot of money and do something that a lot of people talk about, but its long-term success is detrimental to the brand value of Black Rifle. Right. So you're constantly trying to work like what makes sense.
No, 100%, and what are we going on year 8 now? I mean, so it's still very new, right? From when Evan and the guys created it back in 2014. Yeah.
So is it understanding that you have to be profit driven, but really you're foundationally built on a purpose driven mission is really kind of what has helped you succeed so much, not only personally, but professionally since getting out?
Yeah.
Or is there something else?
Yes. No, I think it has. And even when so Black Rifle wasn't my first. So I worked for, first of all, if I did contracting, government contracting, I call that the cheating, right? So I used my JTAC skills and did a bunch of ISR work, over in Afghanistan. But that's still, I mean, it's a civilian company, but you're doing your same job you're doing but then when I came back from Afghanistan contracting there was an aviation company in Oklahoma. And I was doing the same ISR stuff, but then it was kind of my background led me into working for the CEO. And that's where I got to attend a board meeting. They sent me over to London to go talk to, potential buyers that bought the company. And so you get to see that. And so when I came in with Black Rifle, it's kind of the same thing. When I worked directly, I worked directly for Evan, like I always still kind of do. I say that, but anyway, I definitely did for a good year and a half. Is I was in for his mind. And so learning revenue and brand and customer service, right? The customer experience and how that lifetime value, there's all these, buzzwords and things in the marketing, your lifetime value adds up. Because sometimes maybe it isn't the profit, right? Sometimes it is just the customer experience, right? And what you do, surprise and delight, right? Surprise and delighting customers is key.
No, and that can not only be applied in the business sense, but also personally, right? Like it's under promise and over deliver when you're talking to somebody, and it's kind of going above and beyond, like you said.
Yep.
Like you said,
because
15 minutes if I'm not 15 minutes early.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Well, the reverse is horrible. Was it? Yeah. over promising and under delivering, right, is the worst, right?
Because it goes back to where we started this conversation, is reliability. Yep. You are not an asset, you're a liability. And liabilities, when you're looking at a balance sheet, you need to be reduced as much as possible. Otherwise, you run out of money, the business goes under, the culture is shot, and you can't perform as an organization.
No, and we, Evan created, we call it the 3 Ps: professional, polite, and positivity, and then being positive. And like, that's a reliability factor. If you're reliable to maintain those 3 core, the 3 Ps, right, you're showing your value even from there. You miss one of those or trash one of those, now you're becoming a liability.
No, absolutely. And it's keeping that so front of mind, it influences every decision made, every action taken.
Right.
Because that's what the culture organization is built on.
Right. And now it's not easy, right? I mean, you can go down a rabbit hole of emotional intelligence. I mean, again, even, at age 50, I'm a lot different than I was at 35. I can look back at old decisions and be like, I wish I would have been emotionally intelligent as I am now, but even that, again, I know the other day I kind of lost mine. I got a little emotional on something, but you're human. But I do feel I'm one of those, I guess ageism, I think as you get older, hopefully your emotional intelligence gets better. And I definitely feel like mine has. So
So focusing on emotional intelligence, and we can use that if you want, but really, like you said, you've understand that you're continually growing. Emotional intelligence is something that you have to experience and gain and fail a little bit. Whether it's a failure in emotional intelligence or just from somewhere else, what failure has ultimately made you the most successful?
Without getting into any details, there was some of my background is kind of all over the place, but it was right towards the end of my career. Actually, something happened at my TACP unit in Oklahoma. I really wasn't happy with it, and I made I wouldn't say poor, but it was a good decision as I look back on it. But if I would have been emotionally intelligent, I know how I would have handled that situation different, but not caused me to make an emotional decision. But it was still good because you end up, it's anything, if you turn it around. So you can see, all right, hey, I just made this emotional decision and I can't take it back, but now how do I turn that to the positive? And it's what ended up leading me to be the interim, I was the interim group first sergeant for the Tulsa Air National Guard, the fighter wing up there, which was great, and that's when I actually determined I was going to retire. They were trying to get me to first sergeant school. I was sitting in that spot and I ended up retiring. But again, that is one of the incidents that I know happened, that I look back and I could replay it and I know exactly how it went down. And, you just never know how things turn out. But again, being on the positivity side, the positive, it definitely did. I mean, it gave me a chance to again, I mean, I was the interim group first sergeant for the fighter wing, which was great.
Which is a massive deal because let's just give people context of how big that organization is.
Yeah. I don't know the bodies, but it's an F-16, so it's a fighter wing, and the group is below the wing. So wing would be your top echelon, and then group, right, and then squadron. Yeah, so it's the middle. And it's a board, right? I had to go in front of a board and compete against, a lot of other E7s, in the Air Force that, had a good background. And so, and I felt great to be selected. It just happened to be, again, at a point in my career too, where I was hitting about 24 years. And I knew it was time for me to retire. But, but again, that decision to go up there to that unit was, I can definitely trace that back to this one incident that happened. And I was, emotionally unintelligent and, flared up rage and was like, I'm done, and went and did something else. But again, wind up knowing it was, but I knew I couldn't take it back. There was no, take back sometimes.
How do you check yourself now to at least minimize making those emotional decisions and really kind of thinking through it, now being where you're at as opposed to back when you were about to get out, 6-7 years ago?
Yeah. Time. So you got to be patient. You really, and I know there's techniques, count to 3 and stuff like that. I think it comes down to knowing not when to send an email, right? So, right, in my young days, you might be typing up an email real quick and then hit enter. Now I might hand type it on my notes, on my phone, and then reread it. And like, do I want to send that? Nope, let's not even put it on the email. So it's a note, but it's a note. But that's a key thing, even when we talk about failures, because that emotional decision wasn't a failure. I mean, it turned into be a success, but you learn from it. And that's what I did, right? And that's what makes it successful is I learned from that. So I know now, take the time. And also the other thing too is bounce ideas off of other, mentors, people that you trust, right? Having that trusted circle, type something up, but don't hit send. Let someone read it real quick. And even if you're still hot, hey, can you read this real quick? I need you to read it now. And let them read it. And then you're like, all right, what do you think? Don't send it. Okay, great. I won't. All right. And then you can talk it through. Whereas back then, again, that decision that I made, it was a snap of a finger, nope, and I made a decision.
And that also speaks to your own personal intelligence of who you kind of keep around as a mentors or almost like a personal advisory board, right? You're able to kind of say, when you say, hey, I need you to read this right now, and they can kind of see and hear that you're kind of off and you're kind of going out an emotional road. It kind of throws up a couple flags and they're like, all right, let's kind of stop what I'm doing. Let's focus on, what Dan needs and let's look into this a little bit more. I think that's super powerful.
It is, it's the company you keep type of scenario. We have a retired E9, Chachi, on board, who's our director of strategic partnerships. And Chachi was our E9 for Tech Peace. And I very much, and so I very much, now that he's on board, right, and we have our relationship from our past, I hit him up and he hits me up all the time to be able to look at, issues and say, what is this? How would you react? What should I do? But we're open enough, and this comes a little bit from the military, which I'm not sure in the civilian side if you have or not, or people have or not, but it's to be able to take the feedback. If I'm wrong, so if I say, hey, read this email, and he reads it, he's like, all right, it's you. You're the drama, right? And I have to be able to accept that.
Yeah.
If I ask someone to read it and I need their feedback, if their feedback is you're the drama, you're like, okay, well, hit me with what I need to correct then. And you have to be open enough about yourself to accept feedback.
Dan, you're turning this into a masterclass because you keep going full circle, right? Expectation management. When you have those people that you trusted agents, like you mentioned, you expect them to look out for not only your best interest, but making sure the organization, if they're inside your organization or outside, is working properly. And if you are the problem at some points, they're not going to stop from saying, hey, like you said, check yourself.
Right. You don't need friends to be yes men, yes women, if they're friends, that's what, you have to keep it real. It sounds so cliche.
Absolutely.
But it's true.
No, I love it because I say that all the time. Dan, thank you so much for your time today. Before you go, I have one last question. Okay. Dan Horgan, how are you better today than yesterday?
I am better today than I was yesterday because every day I do wake up and I'm thankful and I'm positive for the things and then the people in my life. Beautiful wife, 4 children, and then just all the friends that I have. And you can look back and you can say there's so many woes, right? We'll make a joke. My leg is all busted up. I get it. And I can be anyone, something happens to you and you could be so woeful, but that one busted leg is one thing compared to I could do a laundry list of the things that I'm thankful and positive for. So every day as I do that, it makes me better each day.
What is that thankfulness, gratitude, kind of mindset, piece look like? Do you write it out? Do you say it to yourself? Do you make sure that's time, 5 minutes? You're like, hey, I just have to kind of take some time, make sure I'm thankful. What does that look like?
Early morning, right? As you get older, sometimes you wake up early, so I'm an early riser. No, it's to myself. I've read a lot that people can journal and writing it down, and I do like to write, but I find out sometimes I end up being lazy and I don't write it down. So it's more an internal check, right? Even when you're showering, there's any time, right? I mean, you're in the shower, you're by yourself, you're not meditating, but it's a perfect time to be like, okay, checklist, choop, 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 got it.
I love that. Just like once attack P, always attack P, right? Going through the checklist. Absolutely. Love it.
Right.
Dan, thank you so much for coming on, sharing
Thanks,
your strategies, your methods, your actionable advice. Before we go, though, where can people go to connect with you?
Yeah, I'm on 2 platforms. LinkedIn is obviously my first preferred platform. So, Dan Horgan on LinkedIn. It's actually my face. It's a good recent picture. I had someone do a professional headshot, and so I am in a tie. And then Instagram. So Dan_Horgan_ is on Instagram, but again, not a fake picture or anything. It's of my face. And I'm pretty active on Instagram too. Instagram gets to be a little bit more creative and fun than LinkedIn, but LinkedIn again has a lot of great creativity. But those are 2 main places that you can find me and hopefully connect.
And we'll make sure we link that in the show notes so you can connect with Dan, the man himself.
Thanks, sir.
Dan,
yeah,
again,
thanks,
thank
Tom.
you so much thanks for coming on, and thanks for having our 6. Appreciate it.
All right. Thanks, Tom.
I don't know what you've been told, Sixers, but the lawyers would like us to remind you that the views, opinions, and comments expressed on the Got Your 6 podcast are solely those of the hosts or guests, to include current and previous Department of Defense employees, and should in no way be considered the opinions of or endorsements on behalf of the Department of Defense or any of its components, divisions, contractors, or other current and previous staff members.